Be at war with your vices, at peace with your neighbors, and let every new year's find you a better man. Benjamin Franklin. Hope smiles from the threshold of the year to come, whispering, "It will be happier." Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Perhaps few things resound so completely in the human heart as notching out the passage of time with temporal landmarks that interrupt the ordinary day-to-day occurrences of life. I suspect you've noticed by now that humans are instinctively drawn to rituals, and anything allowing us to separate time into before and after. Sloughing off the weight of our past failures and negative experiences while embracing the potential our future holds is of particular importance to our journey. Drawing that line indelibly in bold black ink on our mental timeline gives us permission to figuratively wipe our slate clean and begin again with a renewed vigor strengthened by a backbone of hope. Behavioral scientists call this the fresh start effect, and it's crucial for an individual's self-efficacy, which simply equates to a belief in one's own ability to accomplish tasks or goals, which spark to life the burst of motivation essential to overcoming mental blockades and instigating changes. In the words of Alexander Pope, hope springs eternal in the human breast, and in the case of resolving to begin again with a slate wiped free of failure and demoralization, nothing could be more true. This phenomenon isn't a trendy Instagram fad or a TikTok flash in the pan, nor is it a useless ritual doomed to fail after the first flush of enthusiasm wanes and your vision board falls behind your filing cabinet. What it is elemental to the way our minds keep track of time and how we ultimately build resilience. And it's as ancient as, well, the human race. A few years back, in 2000 or so BC, the Babylonians were taking notes and punctuating their timelines with 12-day celebrations heralding the new year, which fell on the first new moon following the vernal equinox, right around March 20th. During this observance, the agrarian cultures of the ancient Babylonians and the Assyrians honored the rebirth of nature after a withering winter with a religious festival called Akitu. They started by making vows to the gods to be better in the coming year, returning all the farm equipment they borrowed from one another, and paying back their overdue debts. Then they reaffirmed the divine authority of the king, or kicked him to the curb for a more divine one, and looked forward to the new season of planting now blessed by their gods. Some years this worked out just fine, and in others, presumably everybody was looking around wondering just who had broken their vows. Meanwhile, along the banks of the Nile, the ancient Egyptians were waiting on an annual flood and the appearance of the star Sirius to mark the start of their new year, when they would also return all their borrowed tools, make promises and offer sacrifices to the gods, and pray for a prosperous harvest. Over in ancient China, the new year was recognized when the second moon after the winter solstice arrived and marked the beginning of spring. Feasts were held to honor the ancestors and deities, and celebrations lasted just over 2 weeks. By the time Romulus gave birth to Rome, he'd about had it with time getting away from him, despite everyone's best efforts to keep track, prompting him to create the first 10-month lunar calendar in 738 BC, which set the new year in March, which he most likely based on the ancient Greek calendar, which relied on the cycles of the moon and the agricultural seasons, and which in turn was copied from the ancient Babylonians. And all of this was well and good until the sun got ahead of things and left everyone well and truly confused about just where in time they were. It seems that ignoring those pesky extra 61 1/4 days did not, in fact, make them go away, and tucking them into the folds of the deep winter months was not enough to keep the passing years in harmony with the sun and the correct seasons. Finally, in 46 BC, legend has it that Julius Caesar, who had had enough of the constant time changes, consulted with astronomers and mathematicians, who all agreed with him that it was ridiculous to have lost so much time. This meeting of the minds resulted in Caesar instituting the Julian calendar, which swept up the now 90 days that had somehow been lost over time, and designated Numa Pompilius's added month of January as the start of the new year. In this way, he could honor the god Janus, from whom the first month gets its name, the deity who lingered in the doorways and arches looking backward into the past and forward into the future simultaneously with his dual faces. Obviously, a god you wouldn't be entirely comfortable meeting in a dark alley, which is just fine because he prefers those doorways. The Roman world took a moment to rejoice and celebrated their newly consistent year by offering sacrifices, exchanging gifts in the form of sacred branches, and decking their halls and throwing raucous parties. And the ancient Romans, both practical and spiritual, returned what they had borrowed, paid debts, stocked their pantries, and engaged in introspection and intentional self-renewal. Everything went along swimmingly for a time until others got involved. And as we all know, others are the worst. Once again, heading towards the Middle Ages, folks got a bit too big for their britches and began moving around the day on which the new year was celebrated, attempting to correspond it to one religious day or another, until in 1582 Pope Gregory XIII put his elegantly shod foot down and established January 1st as the beginning of the new year, with the advent of the Gregorian calendar that put a stop to the inconsistency of calculating the date of Easter, and which also dropped 10 days from the Julian calendar to realign with the astronomical year. Apparently, when Pope Gregory XIII finalized a thing, it stayed finalized as we continue to use this calendar even today. But before Pope Gregory XIII got a hold of the calendar, Knights of the Realm, most likely inspired by the Arthurian legends, are said to have reaffirmed their commitment to chivalry and virtuous living at feasts held after Christmas by placing their hand upon a live or roasted peacock or swan and committing themselves to what was known as the Peacock Vow, which re-established their dedication to the code of chivalry for the next 12 months. A particular resolution that I think the peacock would have preferred to witness without having to kiss their elaborately feathered arse goodbye. To the great relief of bird kind everywhere, from the 17th century on, the record of resolutions being set at New Year's would grow exponentially, while bird-related vows would decrease. Meanwhile, the colonial Puritans hit the shores of America, bringing a tradition of quiet introspection rather than revelry at the New Year, with the venerable Jonathan Edwards of Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God fame being known to have created over 70 resolutions over a period of several years, which included a vow to never speak ill of anyone, unless there was a particularly good reason to do so. The Methodist founder John Wesley established covenant renewals, or watch night services, on New Year's Eve or day, where scripture was read and hymns were sung, prayers offered up, and resolutions for the new year were made, keeping the focus of his parishioners' resolve between themselves and God tightly intact. And then, in 1813, the first article to use the term New Year's resolution was printed in a Boston newspaper. And this oldest of holidays, celebrated worldwide across millennia, with its culturally shared phenomenon of starting fresh at the beginning of the year, was defined most succinctly into a single phrase. And the party continues on, only with a new twist. Back at the beginning, in old Babylon, resolutions or New Year's vows were taken in a religious context by committing oneself to a fresh start before God, and thereby instituting a mindset of accountability to a higher, more divine authority. But this age-old tradition has become largely secular in nature in our modern mindset, with individuals making promises to themselves, about themselves, and the most common resolutions being centered around self-improvements in personal growth, health, and fitness, and finance. And while approximately 45% of individuals will sincerely set their New Year's goals, only about 8% of them will be successful in attaining them, on average losing momentum after the 3-month mark. It's suggested that setting grandiose resolutions without also setting realistic, smaller, bite-sized goals, which can give you a boost of accomplishment, and thus encouragement to continue in pursuit of the larger visions, may be to blame for the lack of success and the drops in individuals' self-efficacy. But I propose it could just be the lack of prideful fowls suitable for vowing upon. Or maybe it's that making a promise to ourselves to do something is far less compelling than working diligently towards a goal to which we've attached a divine purpose or approval. Either way, the importance of marking time by breaking with the old, reframing our intentions, and stepping into a new, untapped year brimming with fresh potential cannot be overstated. After all, as George Eliot pointed out,
it is never too late to be what you might have been.
We hope you've enjoyed today's video, and that if you did, you'll consider liking it, sharing it with your family and friends, and even subscribing, as all of it helps our channel continue to grow. Now go give yourself permission to turn a fresh page in your life's book, return a few tools, and scribble out some resolutions of your own. But by all that is holy, stay away from the peacocks. No one can scream bloody murder like an enraged peacock, and I think we can all agree we now know why. Thank you for watching. See you next time.